The Empress's hand trembled, a movement so slight that only those closest to the throne could perceive it. Counselor Saelith noticed. The gathered nobles noticed. And Marcus Chen, standing in chains at the center of the Grand Hall, certainly noticed. The human will be executed at dawn, Saelith declared, his silver skin catching the bioluminescent light that pulsed through the crystalline walls. His trespass into the sacred grove cannot be forgiven. The silence demands blood. Marcus didn't struggle against his restraints. After 18 months as a xenoanthropologist on Velthera, he understood enough about the Valkyrie to know that protest would only hasten his death. Their culture was built on absolute silence, 1,000 years of wordless communication through gesture, pheromone, and telepathic impression. To speak aloud was the gravest sin. To speak in the sacred grove, as Marcus had accidentally done when he'd stumbled upon it while fleeing a sandstorm, was unforgivable. He'd only said one word. Hello? It had been enough. The Empress sat motionless on her throne of living crystal, her pale violet skin luminous, her 4 eyes fixed on some point beyond the assembled court. She had not moved since the trial began. Had not gestured. Had not released any detectable pheromone. The Valkyrie nobles shifted uncomfortably. Their Empress's total stillness was itself a kind of statement, though none could interpret it. Empress Saelith had ruled for 300 years, ever since the death of her bonded partner in the Crystalline Wars. 300 years of perfect silence, perfect composure, perfect isolation. The nobles whispered, through gesture and scent, never voice, that she had become more statue than sovereign. That her grief had calcified into something beyond emotion. Marcus met her gaze. He didn't know why. Perhaps because he'd lost someone too, his wife, Elena, to a colony ship accident 7 years ago. Perhaps because he recognized something in the Empress's stillness that felt familiar. The particular emptiness of someone who had stopped expecting anything from the universe. She blinked. All 4 eyes in sequence. Saelith gestured sharply and 2 guards seized Marcus's arms. Remove the human. Prepare the execution chamber. The court began to disperse in their silent, graceful way, flowing like water around obstacles, communicating in subtle shifts of posture and chemistry. Marcus was dragged toward a side passage, his boots scraping against the polished floor. Then the impossible happened. Stop. Dot. The word rang through the chamber like a thunderclap. Every Valkyrie froze. Several collapsed to their knees, overwhelmed by the sheer wrongness of sound in their sacred space. Saelith's silver skin paled to near white. Empress Saelith had spoken. She rose from her throne and Marcus realized he'd never seen her stand. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, and moved with a grace that seemed to bend the light around her. Her robes, woven from living crystal threads, chimed softly with each step. The nobles couldn't even gesture their shock. They simply stared, paralyzed. Saelith descended the steps of her dais and walked directly to Marcus. Her 4 eyes examined him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. Up close he could see the fine scales along her cheekbones, the way her inner eyelids flickered with what might have been uncertainty. She raised one long-fingered hand and touched his face. Through the telepathic contact, Marcus felt something he couldn't name. A vast, echoing loneliness, a curiosity that had been suppressed for centuries, and beneath it all, a question. Why did you speak in the grove? He answered honestly, knowing she could sense any lie. I was lost. I was afraid. Where I come from, when we're afraid, we reach out. We make sound. We remind ourselves we're not alone. Her eyes widened slightly. The hand on his face trembled. Speaking is forbidden in her culture, Saelith hissed, finding his voice through sheer outrage. Empress, you cannot. The silence has stood for 1,000 years. Saelith turned to face her court. When she spoke again, her voice was rough from centuries of disuse, but every word was deliberate. The silence was meant to protect us from the chaos of the old wars. But I wonder now if it has only taught us to fear connection. She looked back at Marcus. This human spoke because he was afraid of being alone. In 1,000 years, not one of you has understood that the silence itself is loneliness given form. She released Marcus's face and gestured to the guards. Remove his chains. He will not be executed. Empress, he will remain in the palace as my guest. Her 4 eyes swept the chamber, and even through his shock, Marcus could see the weight of what this moment cost her. She had shattered a millennium of tradition in a single breath. Until I decide otherwise. The chains fell away. Marcus rubbed his wrists, staring up at the impossible figure before him. Thank you, he said quietly. Several nobles flinched at the sound. Saelith's expression didn't change. But through the fading resonance of their telepathic contact, Marcus felt something shift, a door cracking open after centuries of being sealed shut. You do not thank me yet, human. I have not decided if saving you was wisdom or madness. She turned and walked back toward her throne, leaving her shattered court to pick up the pieces of their world. 3 weeks passed in the Palace of Living Crystal. Marcus was given quarters in a tower overlooking the Amber Sea, luxurious by any standard, but he noticed the guards stationed at every exit. Guest was perhaps too generous a word. Prisoner with privileges came closer to the truth. Still, he wasn't dead. That counted for something. The Valkyrie servants who attended him communicated only through gesture, their movements precise and economical. They brought him food, strange fruits and cultivated proteins that his translator implant assured him were safe, and removed his soiled clothes for cleaning. They never met his eyes. He spent his days studying as he always had. His tablet had been confiscated, but he'd been allowed paper and writing implements. He documented everything he could remember about Valkyrie culture, filling page after page with observations, questions, and theories. It was what Elena would have wanted. She'd always said his obsessive note-taking would save his life someday. She'd been wrong about that. His notes hadn't saved her when the oxygen recyclers failed, but the habit remained. On the 18th day, Empress Saelith came to see him. She arrived without announcement, stepping through the crystal-threaded doorway as silently as a shadow. Marcus looked up from his writing to find her watching him from across the room. "You're documenting us," she said. He set down his pen. "I'm a xenoanthropologist. It's what I do. Even now? As a prisoner awaiting judgment? Especially now." He gestured at his pages. "If I'm going to die, I'd like my work to mean something. Maybe someone will find these notes someday. Maybe they'll help humans understand your people better." Saelith crossed to his desk, her crystalline robes chiming with each step. She picked up one of his pages, studying his handwritten script. "You write by hand?" "Not with machines. Elena, my wife, she always said there was something more honest about handwriting. The way the letters shake when you're tired. The way the ink bleeds when you press too hard." He paused. "She died 7 years ago. I've kept writing by hand ever since." The Empress set down the page. Her 4 eyes fixed on him with that unsettling intensity. "You still wear a ring." Marcus touched the simple band on his left hand. Titanium alloy designed to survive deep space conditions. Elena had joked that their marriage would outlast the heat death of the universe. "I do. Why? She is gone. The bond is broken. Is it?" Marcus met her gaze. "I still love her. Death doesn't cancel that." Saelith went very still. That particular stillness he'd seen in the throne room, the kind that seemed to compress centuries of emotion into a single held breath. "My bonded partner died 300 years ago," she said finally. "Kethvar. He was killed in the final battle of the Crystalline Wars." I held his hand as the light left his eyes. Marcus said nothing. Sometimes, silence was the only appropriate response. For 300 years I have not spoken. Not because the silence demanded it, though it did, but because I had nothing left to say. Words felt hollow. What use was speech when the only voice I wanted to hear was gone forever? She moved to the window, looking out over the amber sea. The setting sun caught her scales, painting her in shades of gold and rose. "And then you spoke in the sacred grove, one word. Hello, such a small thing." She turned to face him. But I heard it echo through the crystal lattices of the palace. Through my bones. Through my mind. And I realized something. What? The silence had not honored Kethvar's memory. It had merely allowed me to hide from my grief. To become stone instead of facing the agony of continuing without him. Her voice dropped. "You spoke because you were afraid of being alone. But I have been alone for 3 centuries, and I never made a sound." Marcus stood slowly, approaching her as one might approach a wounded animal. "Sometimes the bravest thing is to keep going," he said. "But sometimes the bravest thing is to admit you're not okay. There's no wrong answer. There's just surviving, however you can." Saelith's inner eyelids flickered. "Your people are strange. You speak of emotions so freely. Among the Valkyrie, such vulnerability would be considered shameful. Maybe. But where I come from, we have a saying, shared pain is lessened. Shared joy is increased. We're not meant to carry everything alone." She studied him for a long moment. Then very slowly she reached out and touched his hand, the one with the ring. The telepathic connection flared between them. Marcus felt her grief, vast and cold as an ocean. But beneath it he felt something else, a tiny spark of warmth. Curiosity. The stirring of something that might, given time, become hope. "Your people share their burdens? Why try. Teach me." Why, he blinked. "I'm not sure The court is in chaos. Saelith is rallying the noble houses against me. They say I have gone mad. That the human has corrupted me with his speaking." Her grip on his hand tightened. "I need an advisor. Someone who understands this rawness that I feel. Someone who has lost as I have lost and learned to speak again. I'm a xenoanthropologist, Your Majesty. Not a politician." "No. You are something rarer." Her 4 eyes softened just slightly. "You are honest. And in 300 years I have not met anyone who could say the same." Marcus looked down at their joined hands, his small and brown, hers long and violet, both bearing the invisible weight of grief. "What would you have me do?" "Stay," she said. "Speak. Help me remember what it means to be alive." It wasn't a command. For the first time, Marcus heard the vulnerability beneath her authority. She was asking. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll stay." The assassination attempt came 6 weeks later. Marcus woke to the sound of shattering crystal, his door exploding inward under the force of a breaching charge. He rolled out of bed instinctively, hitting the floor as 3 dark shapes poured into his chamber. Valkyrie, but not wearing the palace livery. Their scales had been dulled with matte coating to prevent them from catching the light. One carried a neural disruptor. Another held a blade that hummed with some kind of energy field. They didn't speak. Of course they didn't. Marcus grabbed the only weapon available, a heavy crystalline lamp from his bedside table, and threw it at the nearest attacker. It struck the assassin's shoulder, disrupting his aim just enough for the neural pulse to go wide. Then they were on him. He fought. Elena had insisted he learn combat basics before their first deep space assignment. The universe is full of things that want to kill you, she'd said. At least make them work for it. He made them work for it. There were 3 of them, and they were faster, stronger, and trained for this. The blade caught his side, slicing through his sleep clothes and the skin beneath. Marcus gasped as cold fire spread through his ribs. One of the assassins pinned him to the floor. Another raised a neural disruptor for a point-blank shot. And then the wall exploded. Saelith came through the breach like a goddess of vengeance, her crystalline robes replaced by armor that seemed to grow from her very skin. Her 4 eyes blazed with violet light, and her hands crackled with the same energy that powered the assassin's blade, but magnified 100-fold. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The assassins tried to flee. They made it 3 steps before the Empress's power caught them, crystalline lattices erupting from the floor to encase their limbs. They struggled silent even in their terror as Saelith advanced. She stopped beside Marcus, her gaze sweeping over his wounds. Her expression didn't change, but through their increasingly familiar mental connection, he felt her fury, white-hot and ancient, the rage of an empress whose authority had been challenged. You are injured. I'll live. Why? He pressed his hand against his bleeding side. No, I were here for me. Kay, we're here because of you. Because the noble houses fear what you represent. He knelt beside him and her armored hand touched his face with surprising gentleness. Because I have changed, and they cannot accept it. Guards were pouring into the chamber now, loyal ones wearing the Empress's personal sigil. They secured the crystallized assassins while a medical team rushed to Marcus's side. But Saelith didn't move. She remained kneeling beside him, her hand on his face, her 4 eyes fixed on his. This is my fault, she said. Aloud. In front of her guards, her servants, anyone who could hear. Marcus caught her hand before she could pull away. No, this is the fault of whoever sent them. You saved my life. You should not have needed saving. I should have protected you. I should have... Her voice cracked. Actually cracked. The sound seemed to shock her, and she fell silent. The medical team was applying pressure to his wound, scanning his vitals, preparing to transport him to the healing chambers. But Marcus held on to Saelith's hand. 300 years ago, he said quietly, you couldn't save Kethvar. And you've been punishing yourself for it ever since. Hiding in silence. Refusing to connect with anyone because you were afraid of losing them too. Her inner eyelids flickered rapidly. You do not understand. I understand better than you think. After Elena died, I threw myself into work. Took the most dangerous assignments. Part of me hoped something would kill me so I wouldn't have to carry the weight anymore. He squeezed her hand. But we don't honor the dead by dying too. We honor them by living. By connecting. By letting ourselves feel even when it hurts. Marcus, you saved me. Not because you had to. Because you chose to. His vision was starting to blur, blood loss probably. But he forced himself to focus on her face. That choice matters. It means you're not stone anymore. It means you're alive. Saelith stared at him. Something shifted in her expression, some final wall crumbling behind her eyes. She leaned down and pressed her forehead to his, a Valkyrie gesture he'd learned meant more than any kiss. The sharing of breath. The mingling of minds. An intimacy so profound that it had been reserved only for bonded pairs for millennia. The guards gasped. The medical team froze. But Saelith didn't pull away. Through their connection, Marcus felt her fear, her grief, her hope. All the emotions she'd denied herself for 3 centuries, finally breaking free. I was so afraid, she admitted. That caring for you meant betraying his memory. It doesn't. Love isn't a finite resource. The heart doesn't run out. How do you know? Because I still love Elena. And he hesitated, standing at the edge of something terrifying and true. And I care for you. Both can be real. He pulled back just enough to look at him. Her 4 eyes glistened with what might have been tears. Then live, she whispered. Live, and teach me to do the same. Marcus smiled despite the pain. That's the plan. The medical team transported him to the healing chambers. He lost consciousness somewhere along the way, lulled by the warmth of Saelith's hand in his and the strange peace of finally understanding why he'd survived Elena's death, why he'd ended up on Velthara, why he'd spoken in the sacred grove. Sometimes the universe didn't make sense. But sometimes it did. The grand chamber of the Crystal Palace had not seen an assembly this large in a century. Every noble house was represented. Councillor Verith stood at the head of the conservative faction, his silver skin rigid with barely contained outrage. Across from him a smaller but growing group of reformists clustered around Lady Maelys Saelith's cousin, and one of the few who had supported the Empress's changes. In the center of the chamber, on a dais that elevated them above the crowd, stood Empress Saelith and Marcus Chen. He'd healed well over the past 3 weeks. The Velkhari medical technology was remarkable. His wound head closed within days, leaving only a thin silver scar. The true changes weren't physical. He wore Velkhari formal attire now, a fitted coat of deep blue that complemented Saelith's violet robes. At his hip hung a ceremonial blade, a gift from the Empress. On his finger, beside Elena's ring, he wore a new band, living crystal that pulsed with soft inner light. A bonding ring. The engagement had sent shockwaves through the Empire. "This is madness," Verith declared. He'd abandoned gesture and pheromone entirely now. If the Empress could speak, so could her opponents. 1,000 years of tradition, thrown aside for what? A human? A creature from a species so primitive, they still think in spoken words. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Many of the nobles were still uncomfortable with speech, their voices rusty and uncertain. But they were speaking. After a millennium of silence, Saelith had broken open a door that could not be closed. "Councillor Verith," Marcus said, stepping forward. His voice was calm, measured. He'd practiced this speech with Saelith a dozen times. "I understand your concerns, truly. I'm an outsider. My culture is different from yours in ways that probably seem threatening. Seem threatening? Seem threatening?" Verith laughed harshly. "You have corrupted our Empress. You have destroyed our sacred traditions. I have loved her." The chamber went silent. Marcus looked out over the assembled nobles, these silver and violet and gold beings who had ruled their corner of the galaxy in perfect silence for 1,000 years. "I know that doesn't matter to many of you. I know that love, to the Velkhari, has always been private. Hidden. Compressed into gestures and chemicals rather than expressed aloud." He took a breath. "But I'm not Velkhari. And neither, anymore, is your Empress." He turned to look at Saelith. She stood straight and tall, her 4 eyes steady, her crystalline robes catching the light. Empress Saelith spent 300 years in silence. She retreated from the world because she'd lost the person she loved most, and she believed that silence was the only way to honor his memory. But silence isn't honor. It's surrender. It's giving up on the possibility that joy might come again. Saelith reached out and took his hand. The gesture was deliberate, public, unmistakable. "Marcus Chen spoke in the sacred grove," she said, her voice ringing through the chamber. "One word. Hello." And in that moment, I realized something that 3 centuries of meditation had failed to teach me. She looked at Verith, then at the assembled nobles, then back at Marcus. The silence was never about protecting us from chaos. It was about protecting us from feeling, from connection, from the risk of loving and losing again. But a life without risk is not a life at all. It is merely existence. Lady Maelys stepped forward from the reformist faction. "The noble houses are divided, Your Majesty. Many fear what this change represents. But many others." She glanced at Marcus, something like respect in her golden eyes. "Many others have begun to wonder if the old ways were truly serving us, or merely constraining us. The human is not worthy of an empress," Verith spat. "You're right," Marcus said quietly. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. "I'm not worthy. I'm a xenoanthropologist from a backwater planet. I have no title, no lands, no political influence. I carry grief that will never fully heal, and I've made mistakes that I'll regret until the day I die." He squeezed Saelith's hand. "But worthiness isn't about status. It's about choice. I choose to stand beside her. I choose to support her. I choose to love her, openly and without apology, for as long as she'll have me." Saelith's inner eyelids flickered, the Velkhari equivalent of tears. "And I choose him," she said, "not because he is powerful. Not because he is perfect. But because he spoke when speaking was forbidden. Because he taught me that grief shared is grief diminished. Because he showed me that it is possible to love again without betraying the love that came before." She released Marcus's hand and stepped to the edge of the dais, addressing her people directly. "The silence ends today. Not because I command it, but because I believe we have hidden from ourselves long enough. We will not forget our traditions, but we will no longer be imprisoned by them. We will speak. We will feel. We will connect." Her 4 eyes swept the chamber. "And we will grow." The silence that followed was different from the silence of old. It was contemplative rather than mandatory, pregnant with possibility. Then Lady Maelys spoke. "I support the Empress." She knelt, pressing her forehead to the floor in the traditional gesture of fealty. Another noble followed. Then another. Slowly at first, then in a cascade, the reformist faction, and its growing number of converts acknowledged their sovereign. Verith stood alone with his core supporters. His silver skin had gone pale, his posture rigid with impotent fury. "This is not over," he said. The old ways will not be forgotten. No, Saelith agreed. They will be remembered, and they will be mourned. And then they will pass, as all things pass, into history. He raised her chin. You may leave, counselor. Or you may stay and watch the future arrive. The choice is yours. Verith chose to leave. His supporters trailed after him, a dwindling stream of dissent. But they were the minority now. And they knew it. As the chamber began to buzz with actual conversation, tentative at first, then growing stronger, Saelith turned back to Marcus. Her expression was softer than he'd ever seen it. You called yourself unworthy, she said quietly. I meant it, and yet you stood before my entire court and declared your love for me. Marcus smiled. Fear and courage aren't mutually exclusive. Elena taught me that. Saelith reached up and touched his face, her long fingers tracing the line of his jaw. I have something to tell you, she said. What? She leaned closer, and for the first time she spoke his name. Not through telepathy. Not through gesture. Aloud in her own voice with the full weight of 1,000 years of silence behind it. Marcus. Just his name. Just that single word. But it was everything. He pulled her close and she allowed herself to be held, this ancient empress, this grieving widow, this woman learning to live again. Her head rested against his shoulder, and for a moment, they were simply two people who had found each other across the void. I love you, he whispered. I know, she replied. I can feel it. Around them, the Velkari court continued its halting, uncertain conversations, 1,000 years of silence giving way to the strange, beautiful cacophony of connection. And in the center of it all, an empress who had broken tradition for a human who had spoken in the darkness, and a man who had learned that love, like grief, only grows when shared. The future was uncertain. Political challenges remained. Cultural upheaval would not happen overnight. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And that was enough.